I was guaranteed that there'd be a preface for my talk. I'm replacing Colette in this part of the session. So this has been put together very quickly, just FYI. So just to get started, today I'm going to talk to you about the Actions on Invasives, which is a system that we've developed in the National Biodiversity Data Centre. I'll give you an overview of the rationale behind the development of the system, the framework for its design, and I'll take you through the nuts and bolts of the system and its functionality and benefits. But before I delve into that, I think it's worth just taking a moment to remind ourselves of the role that invasive species are playing in the biodiversity crisis. Sometimes I think invasive species are the forgotten child of biodiversity loss, and they sit along pretty attention-seeking siblings like climate change, land and sea use change, pollution and overexploitation. But what we know from the IUCN Red List species assessment is that over 16% of species extinction globally are driven by invasive species, and an additional 40% are driven by invasive species acting with simultaneously with other stressors. So that's more than 50% of species extinctions linked to invasive species. And that's why I think it's important to talk about it here today, and that's why it's a core component of the work that we do in the National Biodiversity Data Centre. And I think on a smaller scale, we see the prevalence and impact of invasive species in our local areas, species like Japanese knotweed, Himalayan balsam, giant hogweed, winter heliotrope, giant rhubarb, the list goes on. And I've seen the capacity of these species, I think we all have, to engulf native plant communities and cause hazards to human health. And that's just one, they're just some examples of the impacts. So that's the real motivation behind taking action on invasive species and why they need to be a part of the conversation when we talk about the biodiversity crisis and taking action to prevent biodiversity loss. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here because I'm aware of the level of work that city and county councils do to address the threat and manage invasive species directly. But that's also why we've developed the Actions on Invasive system, because we know there is an enormous amount of work being done on invasive species in Ireland by lots of different players. For example, invasive species action plans developed by local authorities, biosecurity policies and assessments, monitoring and surveillance for species of union concern, commissioned reports on policy recommendations, research on novel detection systems, awareness raising and by clubs and associations and state bodies. And there's so lots being done. And there's also novel control programs, for example, Inishowen River Trust, looking at a fungicide to treat Japanese knotweed in riparian habitats that are sensitive to chemical use. Giant hogweed here in Limerick, we know that it's being controlled using integrated management, again to reduce the use of chemicals. So these are just a few, but there's many more. And the issue really is that we don't currently have a place or any way to centrally capture what's happening in Ireland. And that's one of the key drivers really behind the development of the Actions on Invasives mapping system, because it will allow us to facilitate information sharing and develop a network of people working on invasives, and provide opportunities for cooperation and collaboration. So that's one of the reasons, but the second reason why we're developing this system is that we need to meet some of our reporting requirements under the European Regulation on Invasive Alien Species. The regulation provides a robust evidence-based framework for addressing invasive species, and as a member state in Ireland, we're obliged to take action and report back on those actions. And the regulation has been developed around a core list of species of union concern, and until recently that list was just 66 species, but there's A further 22 were added just in July. And a large proportion of the species on this list aren't present in the EU. For a lot of the focus for those species is on prevention and early detection, rapid response and eradication. So that involves conducting pathway analysis to identify routes of arrival and the development of pathway action plans to implement actions that will reduce the risk of their introduction, and the development of early detection and rapid response systems which provide mechanisms for rapid reporting and response to invasive species that do arrive. And the National Biodiversity Data Centre has worked closely with NPWS to develop these plans and systems, and you can see them there and also see them on our website. But the regulation also looks at the management of invasive species that are widely spread in member states, and this is where the role of city and county councils really comes in, to monitor and report the populations of national and union concern species present on public land, and to implement measures to contain and reduce their spread, and to monitor the effectiveness of control and containment measures. So the development of the actions on invasive system has those two key drivers. First, to provide a network and information sharing platform for everybody that's taken action, from grassroots organisations like local community groups to city and county councils, to clubs and associations, central government, to kind of have it as a catch-all system for those. And so the actions on invasive system has been developed in the image of the actions for pollinators system, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. And the idea is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so currently we have developed it for 5 groups: gardeners, local community groups, clubs and associations, city and county councils, and central government. But we'll be adding more to this, so farmers, researchers, pet trade and horticultural trade and others. And the design of the system provides a mechanism for both reporting the actions that you're taking, but it also provides a broad kind of evidence-based hierarchy and framework for addressing invasive species. And these are the key categories, so prevention, surveillance, and surveillance, control and restoration, training and awareness, research and others. And what that translates into when we're using the system is a form that users can work through and fill out. But the form also provides that guidance on the types of actions that can be taken. So within prevention, you can adopt a biosecurity policy, you can implement biosecurity actions like developing event-specific biosecurity plans. So that's, say, if there's an event organised where you're bringing a lot of people together, even Canoeing Ireland might have an event where you bring people together from across the country, that you have an event-specific biosecurity plan developed to, say, maybe check and clean your canoe before you bring it into another area. So really simple kind of measures, but just a framework for capturing all of that. You can also upload any policy documents you might have, so we have that functionality there as well. Within surveillance, councils can report on their participation in monitoring programmes, record that they are undertaking surveys, and within the control section you can select the plants and animal species that you're working to contain and provide details on the methods used and their effectiveness. Can also record any education and awareness actions being taken, and including any online awareness raising campaigns that you might be undertaking, research that you're participating in or supporting. And then we have, of course, an other section just for anything that can't be logged within that kind of framework, that you can kind of input your own kind of bespoke work that you're doing. So just to quickly touch on the functionality of the system, users can identify and outline their sites. So this is the kind of how the system looks when you log in and register. You can add your sites using the polygon function. So it works in the same way as the pollinator actions for pollinators. You just outline your sites, and then you can fill out the form for each of those sites. And on the home page, you can then view those, that's the polygon, you can then view those sites and a summary of the details. So you can see, you can put your dot on the map essentially. So summary details will be displayed. You can click on your site. And then I think really the power, one of the key kind of strengths of the system is that then you can use this filter to filter through the group type. So if you're a city and county council, with the nature of invasive species, they can spread across boundary lines, they can be in catchments, and really by looking at these kind of groups, you can then see who else has taken action on invasives and then coordinate with those. So you can also filter by the action type, and you can also filter by the species type. So I think this is a really powerful part of the system, is that if you're working on Himalayan balsam upstream, that you can kind of link in, or sorry, downstream, you can link in with a county council that might be working on it upstream. So I think that's a kind of a key function. So this is the actions for pollinator site. Unfortunately, our actions on invasives is not as densely populated at the moment, but this is the goal, and I feel like I need to set myself the target to catch up with Una on her success with actions for pollinators. And I think today I just want to fly the flag of invasives and say, have a call to action for all of the county councils, city and county councils that are here today, and anybody working on invasive species to really use the system, because the strength of it is in everybody taking action and logging that, because then we can work collectively together. And just on a final note as well, is that we're at the kind of the really beginning stages of working on a national invasive species plan, and I think through this system, it's a very preliminary work on it, but through this system, if we have all of that information, then we can work to make a more robust plan. And we will be, in time, early next year, probably consulting with everyone who's working on invasive species here and everybody else throughout the country. So that's me. I don't know what time I'm at. Thanks.